Welcome back to Tales Arcane. In today's video we're going to talk about NPC companions, and specifically I'm going to give you 5 tips for creating and running NPC companions that are useful to your players and that your players might actually like. By the way, if you like what I do here on the channel, you want to support my work, you can back me over on the Tales Arcane Patreon, where you can also get access to more than 1,000 pages of my original D&D content, including campaign settings, adventures, travel encounters, battle maps, and a whole lot more. There's a link to my Patreon down below this video. At least in my experience, the best NPC companions who travelled with my players for an extended period of time were travelling companions that the players chose. You can't create an NPC, thrust them upon the party, and expect your players to automatically like that NPC. If the players get the sense that they're being railroaded into having a companion, they're probably going to resent that companion, and by extension you as the DM. Now there might be NPCs that I create along the way who I suspect have a higher chance of becoming NPC companions. NPCs that I know the players are going to travel with for at least one session because of some ongoing quest objective who the party might take a shine to and might keep around after that. However, I always have to be prepared for the fact that that might not happen. So my goal is just to include as many likable, interesting NPCs in the world as possible, and then leave it up to my players to decide who they want to cajole into joining them. Once the players indicate to me who they're interested in having as a companion, that's when I start fleshing that companion out. I don't get too bothered about it in advance because I might end up just creating a colourful NPC who goes nowhere and falls by the wayside. Having said that, if you really want to raise the likelihood of an NPC companion being accepted by the party, being a likely candidate for the party, you have to make them genuinely useful to the party. The number one way to make your players like an NPC is to have that NPC perform a really positive function within the player's experience. For example, if the players meet a travelling blacksmith, and that blacksmith is able to mend and upgrade their armour, and all the players can point to the fact that they now have slightly better armour than they had before they met that blacksmith, they're going to take a positive shine to that individual, especially if the character is quite amenable and funny to interact with. Likewise, the players meet a travelling healer, and that healer is able to brew them up potions sitting around their campfire, and now the players have a small but steady trickle of healing potions being brewed for them. The players can really see tangibly why that NPC is useful, and you'll find that 9 times out of 10, an NPC that players take a shine to is an NPC who improves the players' lives. In the first campaign I ever ran, the players bought a wagon, and then they hired a wagon driver. And they really liked the wagon driver because he also cooked their meals at night. He was kind of an all-round handyman, and they just really liked the fact that after an adventure they'd come back to camp and there was Jem the half-orc cooking up a meal for them. And that became a recurring feature in all my campaigns, that whenever a small, simple way was found for an NPC to help the players were like, we like this guy, we'll bring him along. Either way, you'll eventually realise that the players have found an NPC companion. They passed through a village, they helped out someone who had a local problem, and then they decided they wanted that person to come with them, and they convinced that person to come on the road with them, and now you have an NPC companion. That's when you start fleshing out the NPC companion, giving them their own roles and motivations within the party that will make them a more compelling character in the long term. And you know you're not wasting your time doing that because they've already been brought on board. Now let's say your players have got an NPC companion, someone they picked up along the way that they unexpectedly took a shine to, and now they're on the road with this individual. You need to find a key motivation for that person. There is a risk here that that NPC, especially if they have 1 or 2 useful functions that they perform for the party, will become almost like a pet or a magic item that the players just pull out whenever they need that function, and the rest of the time they kind of forget that the NPC is there. To keep the NPC really engaged with the party and vice versa, and to give the NPC a sense of depth within the story, create a core motivation for them. This might be a long-term goal that somewhat aligns with the players. Maybe the big bad evil guy at the end of the campaign has a particular lieutenant who crossed this NPC a long time ago, and the NPC has a personal desire for revenge against this person that the players are going to have to go through anyway to get to the BBEG. Alternatively, if you're running quite a long campaign, you've got room for some side quests along the way, maybe the NPC has a goal that's a little bit separate from what the players are interested in. Maybe the NPC wants revenge against someone entirely separate from the main story of the campaign, wants to find an item that's off in a region the players wouldn't have otherwise gone to, and along the way, the players will probably have to help that NPC achieve that goal if they want to keep them around. That NPC sitting at the fire one night after a couple of weeks on the road might say, hey, I wonder if, at some point we're going to get around to dealing with my issues since I'm here helping you guys out with yours. And hopefully the players will have a greater sense of investment in that NPC if they've gone out of their way to help them. As a really simple example of this, in one of my campaigns, the players picked up a student who had been expelled from a magical university, and that student's goal ultimately was to get readmitted to the university. And although that wasn't a major part of the plot, the players eventually decided that to kind of pay back this NPC for all the work she'd done for the party, they would divert to the university and try to help her get back in. They managed to do that, and eventually that ended up with her leaving the party. She ended up staying at the university to become a student, but from then on, the players had this contact within the university every time they went back, someone who could get them information and get them access to the archive. So there was a payoff for helping their NPC complete or fulfill that motivation. Now, some NPC companions will never engage in combat. The chef might always stay back with the wagon and let the players take care of the dangerous stuff. But sometimes an NPC companion will get drawn into combat, and this is when you have to be quite careful as a DM to balance the role of that NPC within the battle. For example, you don't want the NPC to feel like dead weight in the combat, doing nothing of any particular note. However, you don't want them to do too much and steal the limelight away from the players. At the end of the day, the DM, you are controlling the NPC companion, so you certainly don't want to get the kill on the big boss, since you're the big boss. Now for myself, I'm always going to try to make my NPC companions underpowered, and I want my players to know that. I want my players to know that the NPC doesn't have a lot of HP and isn't going to deal a huge amount of damage, so there's no point in putting them up front in a battle because they're just going to get themselves killed. I want to discourage my players from relying on these NPCs in combat, while still giving the NPC some kind of useful function. For example, some kind of buffing spellcasting effect where maybe they're up the back casting small amounts of healing on the players. It's not going to make a huge difference, but they're still going to feel useful and it might come in clutch at certain moments. Alternatively, maybe their focus is on dealing damage with ranged attacks, they have a bow and arrow, and that's going to be useful for breaking enemy concentration at times. Again, not dealing enough damage to take down the boss, but still helping out and proving their worth to the party. As much as possible, it's also good to give the players a chance to some extent control that NPC in combat. Maybe they yell to the NPC as a free action on their turn where to go and who to attack. They send them orders and that NPC carries those orders out diligently. And then any successes that the NPC has on the battlefield still feel attributable back to the players. My favourite companions, the ones that stress me out the least, are the ones that don't get into combat. They're the pacifist ones who are doing something useful with the camp and with the travelling, but don't necessarily get drawn into the battle, because the players know this is just some commoner they've brought with them, and that throwing them into the front line of a fight with a dragon isn't going to end well. Combat is sometimes going to be inevitable. For example, if the camp gets attacked while the players are resting, the NPC is going to be there, but for the most part, I try to keep the NPCs away from the front line. Players will get tired of certain NPC companions over time. They might be excited about them at first, but as the sessions go by, they might start to treat that NPC companion, as we said before, like an item or a pet that comes out to serve a particular function, but never really gets involved in the roleplay. That, for me, is usually the signal that it's time to retire that NPC. I don't want the NPC just hanging around, making things easier for the players and contributing nothing to the roleplay in the story. So when I can see that the players are bored of them, I find a way to have them organically leave. Maybe they get homesick and they just decide they've been on the road long enough and they go. Maybe they get a letter from home saying that something has happened, a family member's ill, they need to go. Maybe they meet someone along the way, they fall in love with an innkeeper and decide to stay at the inn where the players continue on. It might not be the last time the players see them. Remember I told you about the student who the players managed to get readmitted to a university. They still saw that student every time they passed through the area. She still served a function in the story, she was just no longer an NPC companion. I try to keep my players from having more than one NPC companion at a time in most cases, because more than one just gets a bit unwieldy for me as DM, and especially if we're going into combat with them regularly. So retiring one NPC can be exciting because it opens up room for a new member to join the party, and my players know that, so when one NPC goes away, they start keeping an eye out for the next colourful character they might rope into their party. Finally, I want to talk about an optional rule from the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, which allows you to track and quantify the loyalty and the feelings that an NPC has for the party they're travelling with, how loyal they are, what they're willing to do for the party, and at what point they might consider betraying the party. I don't think this is an essential thing, but I found it really useful in my own games. Here is how the system works. An NPC joins the party as a companion, and they have a loyalty score, somewhere between 0 and 20. It's always capped at 20. Initially, they start with a loyalty score that is half the charisma score of the most charismatic member of the party. So if the most charismatic member of the party has a charisma score of 18, then that NPC companion joins with a starting loyalty of 9. Whenever a player does something genuinely nice for an NPC companion, maybe giving them a really thoughtful gift or helping them come closer to achieving their ultimate personal goal, you increase that loyalty score by 1d4. By the same token, an NPC's loyalty score can go down. If the NPC witnesses the players doing things that are against that NPC's own ethics and alignment. Maybe this is quite a lawful, pious NPC, and they see the players robbing a temple. Well, their loyalty to the party is going to go down by 1d4. And if the players are actively cruel to that NPC on a personal level, perhaps hurting them or stealing from them, it goes down by 2d4. When an NPC companion has a loyalty score of 10 and above, they're going to be really loyal to the party. That's when they're willing to go into battle for the party, to put their life on the line for the party. That's when they feel like a fully integrated member of the group. If it goes below 10, they're still loyal to the party, they're still travelling with them, but they're not going to put their life on the line for these people around them who they like, but they don't feel a deep sense of loyalty to. They're still going to be travelling with the party, but they're just going to be looking out for themselves first rather than the people around them. And of course, if you hit 0, that's when something interesting happens. That's when loyalty ends, and the NPC companion will probably leave the party at that point. Although, they might also decide to stay with the party and betray them. That's why this whole system should be happening behind the DM screen. You're not saying to the players, oh, by the way, you just gave them a gift, so you roll 1d4 and add that to the loyalty score. This is all being tracked secretly. It's a way for you to quantify what level of action is appropriate for that NPC, and it's a way for you to track if and when that NPC decides to turn on the party. And of course, you don't want your players knowing that. You also don't want your players seeing their relationship with the NPC as a transaction. If they know the loyalty is going up when they do something nice, they're going to do nice things just for the sake of securing that loyalty. Of course, this is not essential. Plenty of people will be able to run NPCs without using this system, but I find it's a really good way for myself to track what the NPC would objectively do. I might want them to run in and help out the players in a particular fight where the players are losing, but I look at the score and I say, look, they're below 10. They're not going to do that. So objectively, I can get a bit more of a sense of what that NPC would do without my own emotions coming into play in terms of what I want to happen in the story. That is all for this video. Thank you for watching, and a massive thank you to everyone who backs me over on the Tales of Kane Patreon and literally makes all of this possible. Makes it possible for me to do this as a full-time job. I cannot express how much I appreciate that. By the way, I'm running a Kickstarter later this fall. It's for a 5e campaign setting with anthropomorphic woodland animals in a sort of Napoleonic era setting. It's called Wildergrove, and there's a link to the pre-launch page also down below this video. I'll see you next time.